picking off stuff. I prune them or I clean them. In other words, you're wondering why am I going through? Because you're fruitful. And sometimes you're trying to understand, is this the devil messing with me or is this God pruning me? You know, sometimes it feels the same. And he says, to those who are faithful, what I do is I prune you. So we learn 4 things. We're going to move on. We learn 4 things about this thing that God does when he's picking on us. Number 1, we learn that God will intervene to discipline you. That because he loves you so much, that there are times that God will intervene just like a father and he'll whoop your tail. I don't know if anybody ever had a whooping from God before. I may be the only one. But if you've ever had a whooping from God, I didn't so much mind when Mama whooped me. And Mama had a way of whooping me. Mama had them, especially in church, she had that pinch, that it was worse than anything. It was just, see, you know about it, huh? Because your mama got it from my mama. So it just inherited itself. It just, you know, but that wasn't as bad as when she said, wait till I tell your dad. You just hurt, just at the thought. And just the pain of thinking about it was worse than when you was actually getting the whooping. And God has a way of whooping you, but let me tell you something about his whooping. I hate it when they said, I do this because I love you. But I say, now if you love me, you would do this. Watch this. But you as a parent understand, watch this, that what you call a whooping, what they call a whooping, you call it training and discipline. What they see as pain, you see as a time to bend them the right way. And so God says that there are times that I will, watch this, I will intervene to bend you the way that you should go. That bending can be uncomfortable, but necessary in order to be where he wants you to be. Then we understood that if your life bears fruit, that God will intervene to prune you. In the pruning process, here we go, that word process. In the pruning process, there is a cutting away. And sometimes he cuts stuff out of our lives that we think we need, that we really don't need. And a lot of times, we're trying to hold on to stuff when God is trying to say, if you just let me prune and cut this thing off, watch this, there's some more fruit that's coming, but the fruit can't come if I don't cut this stuff away that's killing. He says, sometimes, not only do I cut out stuff, but I cut out people. That sometimes there are some people in your life that needs pruning. Matter of fact, not just pruning, just cut it out. Because sometimes there are people in our lives that is keeping us from being all that God wants us to be. And God says sometimes, watch this, because we don't have enough sense to prune ourselves, ain't nobody about to cut your face. You be like, don't leave it. The big old thing, one of y'all like, don't leave it, it's all right. be all that he wants us to be. Then we learn one of the reasons that he prunes us is because, watch this, there's always another level in God. There's always another place that he's trying to take you to. There's always somewhere else, no matter where you're at, there's always another level. There's always somewhere else that he wants to take you to. And if you cannot get stagnant, that's why people are not bearing fruit. Because they get stagnant, they get dead, they get comfortable. I wish I could. Sometimes we get comfortable where we're at, and God has said, no, I need to take you somewhere else. But you're thinking, you're so much concentrating on what the process is going to entail that you refuse to see the blessing that's going to come out of the pruning process. So we learn. There's always another level. Last thing we learned that in God and in Christianity that there is no neutrality, or there is no neutral. In other words, if you are saved, if you are in God, you're either going forward or you're going back. There is no neutral. God is never just standing still. God is always moving, and in him, I would say this, in him that we live and move and have our being. You're moving, but you're either moving forward or you're going backwards. And you have to ask yourself this morning, which way am I going? Am I going forward in God, or am I going back? What is my finish gonna look like? What's my finish gonna look like? He says in this passage in Hebrews, camp out here for a minute. He says, in 1, he says, therefore, since we have a great cloud of witnesses, we go back to the 11th chapter, he's dealing with all the saints and the prophets of the Old Testament, and they were there as witnesses and examples to us of how to live in faith. And he said that since we have so great a cloud of witnesses, that, one translation said that we have these people cheering us on. That since you have somebody that's cheering you on, what you need to do, the first thing he says is to lay aside every weight. Lay aside stuff that's holding you back. Lay aside people that's holding you back. He said, lay aside every weight. Some of us have laid aside some weights. You laid aside just enough. You said, I'm going to keep this. Get rid of that. I think I'll keep this one. No. He says to lay aside what? Every weight. He said, and not only lay aside every weight, he said, and then lay aside what? What does it say? Oh, y'all don't want to say that word, huh? He says, lay aside every weight and what? Huh? Huh? Y'all know what sin is, right? Sin really means to miss the mark. This is what it really means. Sin really means that you're, like a daughter said, you're aiming toward a mark and you miss it. That's what sin really means. Sin means that you miss the mark. And he says, lay aside not just sin, but the sin. It's tight, but it's right. He says, lay aside the sin, because everybody in this room, as holy and beautiful as y'all look, everybody got one something. Just look this way. Won't nobody know it's you. Won't nobody know what it is. Just keep looking forward and smile, and nobody will know. But everybody in this room has at least one. Hit your neighbor, tell him, you got one. he says, lay aside the way and the sin that easily ensnares or entangles you, because there is always something, there's at least one something that always trips you up. I told y'all back when we was dealing in Romans, and Paul said in that 7th chapter, he said, when I would do good, that when I want to do right, I don't do it. Because there is always that one something, or one somebody. If it ain't something, you camp out there for a minute. Feel the Spirit of God there. Who is that one somebody? You do all right. You all up in prayer in the Holy Ghost. Then you get a text and you just don't know who God is. You just get all flustered. You just, because why? Because listen, sin, the enemy knows exactly what you like, how you like it, when you like it. If sin wasn't enticing, you wouldn't do it. So he knows how to wrap it up. Just how you like. And you talking about it's all in the presentation. He don't just throw it at you. He present that thing to you just how you like. Listen, and if you don't know what your sin is, or who your sin is, you will always be ensnared and entangled. You ever got into something and say, how in the world? Let me just go ahead and leave this alone. You ever looked at somebody and thought, yeah, that's it. You knew it was wrong, but this is it. And then in the middle, you was like, what was wrong with my eyes? I told y'all before, because sin will take you farther than you want to go. And keep you longer than you want to stay. And cost you more than you want to pay. So he says, in order to avoid that, lay aside, watch this, let me phrase it the Victor Bell way. Lay aside possible sins. It ain't sin yet. Some of us dabble in possible sins. We want to see how close to the edge we can get before it's called sin. How far can I go? I'm talking about saints. Because sinners just sin. They don't think about it. They just sin. But saints, we got to think this thing out. I'll wrap it up, but I won't light it. Let's look straight ahead. I'll go over to the house, but I'll put my coat on. I'm gonna leave y'all alone. Try to have somebody finish strong. Try to have somebody finish strong. Now listen, I'm trying to help somebody finish strong, because the worst thing you can do is get so close to the finish line and then fall out. The worst thing you can do as a saint is get so close to finishing strong, and then the enemy puts something in your way and you fall for it. And so many saints have fallen out. So many saints are losing. So many saints are not even in church anymore because they've gotten so close. So you have to be careful about dabbling in possible sins. Because you have rationalized in your mind that it's not sin. That's why he said, lay aside the weight. Yes, sir. It's too heavy for you. You ever lifted something that was too heavy for you? And your back didn't hurt until a day or so later? Because there is some stuff in your life that you think you can handle. People in your life you think you can handle, and God said it's too heavy, it's a weight. Lay it aside. And then get rid of a sin that so easily entangles you, snares you. And he says, why? So that you can run. You cannot run with weights on. And if you do, you're not going very fast and you're not going to get very far. And he says, you're going to have to run, and he says, run with endurance. Some of us started out and then quit. Many people start the race and then quit. He says, you've got to learn to run this race with endurance. Another translation says, run with patience. Because the reason why a lot of us want to throw in the towel is because we're ready, but we don't have no patience. And when God does not do what we want him to do in 1 week, we're done. When God does not answer that prayer in 2 weeks, we're done. And we're so used to the 21st century living in this microwave generation, living in the system where you put it in and touch 1 minute, go out and come back, and it's done. And most of us go out and come back to church, and when it's not done, we're through with God. And God said, I don't work like a microwave. You can't push a button on me and make me move. You got these fancy microwaves. They know exactly what you put in. You put a thing in and press potato. And it has a certain amount of minutes. They got a button on there that says popcorn. And it knows exactly how many minutes for the popcorn to pop. we do God like that. Car. House. Money. Job. And we press the button. Except when we press the button, we put our own time limit on it.
Yes, sir.
Ding! And when it rings, and then you open it up, and it ain't there, you conclude that God did not answer your prayer, and that God is not God, and so you don't. And God said, don't you treat me like a microwave. You got to run this race, and you're gonna have to have some patience in this race. Because everything you want may not come when you want it. Matter of fact, some of the stuff you want, if you told the truth about it, you ain't even ready for it. He says, run with patience. First time that song is sung, well, in this race that we run, gotta have endurance. I love this next line. Because it's a marathon. This ain't no 2-second race. This Christian thing ain't no 5-second race. No, this bad boy is a marathon. I don't know if anybody ever ran in a marathon or seen a marathon. Everybody say, I've seen it. I watch it on TV, my popcorn. But a marathon takes time. And you cannot start the marathon sprinting and going as fast as you can. He says, you're going to have to do this, run this race, and you have to run it with patience. It's a word for somebody today. That you need patience in this race. That God has heard your prayer. He knows what you need. And just because he hasn't answered it yet does not mean he's not going to answer. That God's delay does not mean his denial. He says, run with patience or endurance the race that is set before us. I love that next verse. He says, here we go. How do we do this? How do you run with patience? How do you run with endurance this race? He gives you the clue in the next verse. He says, looking unto Jesus. You cannot finish this race taking your eyes off of Jesus. He says, looking unto Jesus, who is the author and the finisher of your faith. In other words, he's the one who starts it, and he's the one who's going to finish it. Yeah. And if you need him in the start, you best believe you're going to need him in the finish. Right. And sometimes the finish is a little bit harder than the start. And so he says, you're going to have to look to me, the author and the finisher of your faith. And he goes on to talk about the stuff that Jesus endured. Because if you don't understand, we want to know him in the power of his resurrection. Nobody wants to know him in the fellowship of his suffering. Wow. Wow. We all want the trophy at the end. Yeah. But don't nobody want to sweat on the field. He says, Jesus suffered. And you have not suffered nearly as much. He says to the point of bloodshed. But he said what Jesus did was, the shame, the Bible said that he, in other words, he looked for the end result. And because he saw the end result, he was able to go through what it was going to take to get to the end result. God is trying to tell somebody that if you look to the end result, if you look to the finish line, if you look to what God has for you at the end, going through the race won't seem as hard. But if you always concentrate on what you're going through, when you're not connected to this vine, you run the risk of detachment. I'll give you this thing and I'm going to be through. But there are some dangers of detachment. There are dangers of being detached from the vine. Some dangers are not always immediately seen. In other words, you can get so far away from God and still think you're close. It's like being out on the water and you're close to shore. And then you look up and wonder, how did this boat get so far away from the shore? One of the dangers of attachment is a loss of intimacy with God.
All right. Need that.
A loss of intimacy with God. You cannot afford, especially in this day, to lose intimacy with God. And when you become detached from the vine or detached from God, you run the risk of losing intimacy with God. You run the risk of a loss of peace. Because God says, I will keep him in perfect peace in Isaiah, whose mind is stayed on me. But once you become detached from God, your mind is not on God.
All right.
And then when stuff comes, you are flustered and you don't know what to do because you don't have no peace.
Yeah.
Then you have a loss of discernment. You don't even know what to do. You can't even figure out.
Yeah.
You can't even discern what's going on. Here's my favorite. When you get detached from the vine, the old you returns. You ever said, I ain't done this in 10 years. What in the world? When you start seeing the old you, if somebody tell me, you know what your you is. The old you. Old. The old. The one that's covered by the blood. The one that you don't want uncovered are the ones when you tell people, don't make the old me come out. You know when you put your hand in it, if I wasn't saved, that. If you had did that 6 months ago, that. abide in me and I in you, he says, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. You cannot be who God wants you to be in and of yourself. You can't live right all by yourself. You can't do all the things that God is calling you to do. You don't have it in you to do. How do I know? Paul already told us, when I would do good. He said, matter of fact, he said, when I want to do good, that's when I don't do it. So he said, so in other words, he said that there is nothing in me that will make me do right if I'm not connected to the vine, if I'm not connected to God. And this is the challenge that we have in the 21st century, is that people want to be connected to God without being connected to the vine. They want to say they're connected, but they're not connected to the vine. Listen, you cannot separate God and the church. The two go together. You cannot see, and we want to use the excuse of those people that's in the church, and I ain't like those people. Yes, you are. Because he said it's two kinds of people. It's some fruitful people and some fruitless people. And he said, and fruitless people, if you bearing fruit, you connected to the vine. If you're not bearing fruit, you still can be connected to the vine, you just not bearing fruit. But the point is, you got to be connected to the vine. Because if you're connected to the vine and you're not bearing fruit, I can lift you up and I can clean you. But if you're not connected to me, I can't do that with you. He said you cannot bear fruit in and of itself unless it abides in the vine. He said, so neither can you unless you abide. If you're going to finish strong, you got to be connected to the vine. The vine is your life source. And as long, watch this, as long as you're connected to the vine, you cannot be plucked out. This is why the excuse about those people in the church